Alright, welcome back everybody. Now I'm actually going to talk about ghost stories again. You know, we go from talking about, you know, like more cowbell and everything, and Renero's Pizza, which, like I said in that last video, I still recommend y'all go there and eat. You know, it's good eating. You and Tony like that pizza. I mean, you know, it's pretty decent. Now, like I said, you know, I'm going to talk about some ghost stories. I'm going to talk about a real place here in Kentucky. It's in Louisville. If I get really cocky, you might hear me call it something else. City of Louisville. It's I've been down home, which Tony has not been to Harlan yet. We're gonna go, but didn't work out. You know, you might hear me come back up here and shoot a video where I don't call it Louisville, or what sounds like what I'm calling it now. You'll be like, what the heck did she just call that place? Louisville, Kentucky. You know, home of University of Louisville Cardinals, you know, the Rick Pitino coaches. You know, the basketball team. Well, anyway, down there, and I'm sure some of you have heard of this place. This place is, well, more haunted than Bobby Mackey's, okay, up here in Wilder. I mean, you know, more people died in this place that I want to talk about here than did in Bobby Mackey's. It's a real place, you know. It's real scary from what I hear. I've had a few people, you know, from work want me to go down there with them to Louisville and, you know, pay this place to visit. And I'm like, the place is falling down, you know, unless they, you know, kind of like at least make it somewhat safe for us to walk around. I mean, like, you know, well, more than somewhat safe, a whole lot safe. The answer is no. You know, and it's just, like, I want to talk about, there's a couple of books I have here that talk about this place, in Louisville. One of them, of course, is Ghosts of Old Louisville. And the other one is, Haunted Kentucky. I borrowed this one from the library. Ghosts of Old Louisville is my book. You know, so, you know, and I highly recommend, as a side note, before I go into the place I'm talking about, go into your local library and using it. I did have somebody make a smart aleck comment about me borrowing a video from the library on my, excuse me, movie reviewers page, and I'm like, you know what? There's absolutely nothing wrong with the public library. Okay? There's not. Okay? You know, I go to the public library all the time. You know, matter of fact, after I shoot this video and the other ones that I'm going to do, and the two I just shot, I'm going to go to the library and upload my videos, since this video and the other one, since I don't have internet access that I can use to upload these videos on. You know, because seriously, I mean, there's absolutely, positively nothing, and I repeat, nothing wrong with going to the public library. I mean, unless you're the kind of person that goes in there and gets yourself thrown out because you're an ignoramus, you know, and you're not firing on all 8 cylinders for some reason, because you think you're all that in a bag of chips, you know. But that aside, the place that I'm talking about here that's more haunted than Bobby Mackey's is up here in Wilder. It's, you know, Waverly Hills Tuberculosis Sanitarium. You know, in other words, it's a hospital, children. I'm going to do like what I've done in my previous ghost videos. I want to, well, you know, read verbatim, more or less, what's written in both Ghosts of Old Louisville and Haunted Kentucky about it, you know, and share it with you. I mean, because it's interesting stuff, you know. Ghosts of Old Louisville is written by David Domine. I guess that's how they pronounce his name. This is what he looks like, right here. See if I can, well, oh, there we go. That's what he looks like. He looks like he, you know, had entirely too much fun before they took his picture. He's like, what? You know? There's not a picture of Alan Brown that wrote Haunted Kentucky. There's only like a little ghost girl in the back of that book. But anyway, that aside, let's talk about Waverly Hills. This is what David Domine says about Waverly Hills and Ghosts of Old Louisville. This is what he says, and like I said, I want to read more or less verbatim out of here. Anyone at all familiar with Louisville has heard about the infamous tuberculosis sanitarium at Waverly Hills in the city's south end, and the countless stories of hauntings and strange events surrounding it. A titanic 4-story Art Deco masterpiece with more than 400 rooms at one time. It sits alone and abandoned, looming over Dixie Highway, while the ravages of time take their toll. For more than 20 years it has stood empty and waiting while the inclement weather destroys the roof and exposes its delicate interior to the elements, while thoughtless vandals and hoodlums add to the damage, and a derelict landlord in a community largely indifferent to its fate sat back and watched it slump further from the grasp of restoration, all seemingly oblivious to the important piece of Louisville history decaying in front of them. As if living up to its nickname as the Graveyard of the West, Louisville by 1900 enjoyed the dubious honor as the city with the highest tuberculosis death rate in the nation. Area infirmaries had a difficult time tending to the high numbers of the sick and dying, and as a result, officials approved construction of a wooden hospital atop the windy perches of Waverly Hills in 1910 to better provide patients with an abundant supply of fresh, clean air. Louisville historian Tom Owens explains, the preferred treatment in those days included extended bed rest with plenty of fresh air and sunshine and a long period of convalescence. Originally planned for 40 patients, Waverly Hills usually held at least 3 times that many, and by the early 1920s it had outgrown its usefulness. Built in 1926, the structure standing today provided some degree of comfort to untold numbers of TB victims until it closed in 1961, when improvements in hygiene and the emergence of antibiotics led to a drastic reduction in the number of TB cases. Most records have been lost, but some local historians estimate the number of total dead to be within the tens of thousands, something almost impossible to substantiate without the proper medical documents. One thing relatively certain, however, is that at the height of the epidemic in the 1920s, an average of 1 person per hour died at Waverly Hills. Their bodies subsequently regulated to an unceremonious disposal through the notorious body chute. According to eyewitness accounts, this chute, or death tunnel, as it also became to be known, saved the residents from witnessing a steady parade of death out the door. Instead of constantly wheeling the cadavers past the surviving patients, orderlies surreptitiously hauled them through the underground passage to hearses waiting at the bottom of the hill. If so instructed, hospital authorities immediately cremated some of the bodies on premises. As a result, the untold amount of human death and suffering within the walls of the old sanitarium, a certain mystique about Waverly Hills has arisen amidst by many legends and tales of hauntings. Accordingly, the Louisville Ghost Hunter Society, one of the largest and most prestigious in the nation, has become involved with paranormal research conducted at the ruins of Waverly Hills. If anyone can be considered an authority on the supernatural goings-on at the old sanitarium, its president, Keith Age, and Vice President Jay Gravett would fit the bill. Both have spent hours exploring the rambling spaces of the decaying building, collecting data and research for an upcoming book documenting the series of events they've experienced at Waverly Hills. During a recent interview, Jay Gravett shared his recollections of one of the memorable evenings at the sanitarium while assisting the camera crew for the taping of a well-known reality series. My duty that night was simple: take several girls through Waverly Hills for the Fox reality series Scariest Places on Earth. I had to explain some of the history surrounding the abandoned hospital, he recalls, and some of the paranormal activity experienced there. Jay had devised a simple plan: film everything they encountered while taking the women on their tour. The program directors would use whatever footage they found interesting for the show. He remembers it was an unusually hot July day when they arrived at Waverly Hills. I could tell the girls were feeling apprehensive before we even entered the old hospital. All they could see was this hulk of a building as it sat there like a concord and battered ruin. The main entrance, Gravett told the story of an apparition often sighted at that location. Something he described as a woman running out the front door, her hands and legs in chains, crying and pleading for help. Taking note of the nervous glances girls had been exchanging, he also pointed out a third-story window where a young girl of 7 or 8 had been seen on occasion. According to Rivette, this set the mood for the night to come. Jay swung open the old doors and led the girls inside. After several moments in the lobby, they entered a room directly adjacent to the main entrance. Originally used as the medical director's office, it would be used as a safe room for the girls. Chairs, food, and water had been set up in the room, in case they needed a break while filming or needed a place to run if things got out of control. Jay then proceeded to take them down to the medical wing on the first floor. This involved a trip through the so-called death wing, where the morgue and autopsy room had been located, he recalls. Walking down the dingy hallway, they entered the famous body chute, the converted coal tunnel allegedly used to transport dead bodies from the hospital to the crematorium located down the hill. As they made their way down the tunnel and up towards the second floor, Gravette then told the girls about Ralph, a ghostly maintenance man in white who has been spotted on various occasions. He has been describing the apparition when an eerie red light started to illuminate the entire end of the hallway. Of course, he explains, the girls began screaming and nearly ran me and the film crew down trying to get out of there. After calming them down, he escorted them to the safe room for a break and then continued with the tour. Once they had made the rounds of the other floors, Gravette says they returned to the first floor and the area around the old morgue. As he stood there, one of the huge wind doors slammed shut, causing him to jump back in surprise. They had barely regained their composure when something small and metallic could be heard bouncing down the hallway. It turned out to be an old-time bottle cap from a soda, he explains. Just out of the blue like that. Jay says this drove the girls over the edge and sent them back down the hallway for another break in the safe room. According to Jay, Keith Age then took over, and within moments, the electromagnetic field started clicking and jumping up the scale. A piece of equipment used in ghost huntings, an electromagnetic field meter or EMF meter, can detect the disturbances in the natural electromagnetic field produced when ghosts or other paranormal phenomena are present. According to Age, the meter should not have gone off in the building unless it encountered something magnetic. Electricity had been disconnected in the 80s, but strangely enough, the meter continued to react to something, and whatever it was moving. When I followed the signal to a small room divided in half with a cinder block wall, the meter spiked to the top of the scale and squealed like it had never done before. Some of breaking glass could be heard, and the needle froze in place at its highest position. Age could be heard, and the needle froze in place. Killiam's EMF reader stopped making a high-pitched noise, but then started to heat up in his hand. So hot, in fact, that the solder actually melted in the circuit board and started to drip out of the meter. Age had to pull the battery out in an attempt to prevent more damage when the group noticed a considerable drop in the room's temperature, from 74 to 52 degrees, despite the hot weather outside. When they later consulted the floor plans for the old hospital, they were more than a little surprised to discover that the chamber had been used as an electroshock therapy room at one time. Age walked down the hall with his group and came to a small room with a heavy metal door and 8 poles connecting to the ceiling from the floor. From these poles, 4 additional rods ran horizontally and connected to the walls, and a large drain sat on the right side of the floor. For many, this room has become one of the creepiest parts of the Waverly Hills experience. According to rumor, this small chamber served as the draining room, a macabre last stop on the road to eternity for many unfortunate tuberculosis victims. Jay Gravette says that during the heyday of tuberculosis hospital, people were dying so quickly that the bodies had to be removed from the hill as quickly as possible as to free up beds for other patients. Residents of Jefferson County supposedly refused to have these infected bodies in their midst, and since Waverly had no cemetery, officials come up with the best solution they could. Corpses would be hung from the poles in the room and then slit lengthwise to drain them of their bodily fluids. They were then whisked away down the body chute. On an even more macabre note, some claim that when the tuberculosis became less threatening in the 1930s, animal staff used the room as a smokehouse to cure the meat from livestock raised and slaughtered on the grounds. The small group then ascended the stairs to the 5th floor, a part of the old hospital notorious for frequent paranormal activity. Officials reportedly housed mentally insane tuberculosis patients at 2 locations on this floor. In 2 rooms, 502 and 506, monitored the ward in 18-hour shifts. According to one story, a head nurse was found dead in room 502 in 1928. She apparently had hanged herself in a fit of depression. The county coroner decided the 29-year-old woman, unmarried and pregnant, had committed suicide. In 1932, another nurse who worked in room 502 supposedly jumped from a balcony and killed herself as well. Local legends claim she was pushed or driven to suicide by the many tormented souls that still linger among the ruins of Waverly Hills. But that's where the reality and fantasy associated with the old hospital start to merge and become vague. Keith Age recalls that room 502 that night did experience many sudden rises and drops in temperatures. Others have reported strange, haunting moans and screams emanating from room 502. Some have seen pallid apparitions of sickly women with haggard faces. A few have even reported sightings of an old-fashioned horse-drawn hearse noisily bolting down the drive leading from the sanitarium. They're only a small fraction of the unnerving tales that have become so typical for Waverly Hills. The book that Jay Gravett and Keith Age are working on with noted paranormal investigator Troy Taylor will make it a fascinating addition to the rich lore and legacy surrounding Waverly Hills, one of the most haunted spots in the entire USA. Like many landmarks in Louisville and around the country, Tuberculosis Hospital at Waverly Hills has paid the price for a community largely indifferent to the fate of so many of its architectural gems. As if years of neglect weren't bad enough, the previous owner tried to have the sprawling building condemned when he couldn't raise up enough money to have the world's largest statue of Jesus built atop the site. Since the overall solidity and excellent construction of the hospital had preserved the structural integrity of the building, he tried to help it along with its demise by digging out large sections of the foundation, among other things. But Waverly Hills still stands, keeping silent watch over the south end of Louisville as the ghosts from its past wander its halls and grounds. A couple recently purchased the opposing fortress and has established a historical society to preserve Waverly Hills before she succumbs to the hardships of the last 20 years have dealt her. I hope it's not too late. Several miles away, old Louisville sits, safely tucked away for the time being, beneath a leafy canopy of green and gold that fades in the fall and disappears altogether in the winter. While brick and mortar crumble off the still noble facade of Waverly Hills, old Louisvillians paint their shutters and prune the azalea bushes in preparation for autumn. When the first parched leaflets go and silently cascades to the sidewalk below, something unseen in the ground starts to pulsate, and the signal runs quietly through the neighborhood. People feel the vibration in their feet and the tips of their fingertips, and they notice the first bristle of chill fall air about them. Somewhere off in the distance, as a milky pall of gray creeps over the horizon, something clicks and hisses. A tiny spark ignites and flickers, then melts into a soft orange glow. The panes of crystal on the old gas lamps gratefully accept the warmth. The day is gone. It is just before dark. It is time the ghosts start to wander the streets of old Louisville. That's, about Waverly Hills, with David Dominy in Ghosts of Old Louisville. I'm going to talk about, Waverly Hills with, Alan Brown. I'm sorry, I had a brain freeze. But we definitely, we'll get on with it here. you know, of course, it basically says the same thing, you know, about, you know, the hospital when it was built. And, you know, the new hospital began on March 12th of 1924 and was completed in 1926, according to Alan Brown. And I'm basically reading from, like I said, Haunted Kentucky, more or less verbatim. You know, and it just, you know, in the early 1980s, it was closed because of, you know, charges of patient abuse. Of course, you know, he also mentions that one owner wanted to demolish it and erect a massive statue of Jesus Christ on the site, but was prohibited from doing so because of the building's listing on the National Register of Historic Places. Of course, it stood abandoned before the current owners purchased it in 2001. Since then, you know, they've been giving tours of the vandalized old hospital, which the proceeds helped fuel the restoration efforts. With the staggering number of deaths that took place there, few people are surprised to hear that Waverly Hills Tuberculosis Sanitarium is thought to be one of the most haunted places in the United States. You know, there's, you know, bouncing balls on the 3rd floor, which is usually given credit to of a ghost of a little boy and a 7 or 8 year old girl who's especially frightening because her eyes are just empty sockets. The girl has also been seen staring out of the 3rd floor window, which David Dominy mentioned in his book. Children have also been heard singing Ring Around the Rosie on the roof of the hospital. Before the hospital was closed, according to Allen, you know, girls and boys were often taken up there for sun therapy. You know, people have seen a man in a white coat walking around the debris in the cafeteria. From the tantalizing aroma of baking bread, occasionally wafts. On the 4th floor, shadow people accompanied by the slamming of doors have been seen. Of course, he also verifies the story that David tells about room 502. It's said to be the most haunted room in the entire facility. You know, a nurse hung herself in 1928 because she was probably unmarried and pregnant. You know, he also talks about the other nurse that jumped from the roof and killed herself. The reason for her suicide is unknown. Some people bold enough to stand in room 502 for a few minutes have heard a phantom voice ordering, "Get out." You know, there's the members of the Louisville Ghost Hunter Society and their guests have had some of the more memorable encounters in the Waverly Hills Sanitarium. Their experiences are included in the book So There I Was by Troy Taylor and Lynn Adams. And, you know, of course, he mentions Keith H. was walking through the old hospital in the early part of this century, the 21st century, to locate hot spots for filming of an episode of Family Channel series World's Scariest Places, when his EMF detector wigged out on him. And, you know, of course, as mentioned in the other book, the electric has been turned off since the early 1980s. You know, he was trying to change the batteries when the temperature dropped from 74 to 52 degrees. You know, later that same evening, a member of the group photographed what appeared to be a glowing light bulb over the landing of the stairs. The photograph is similar taken by American Ghost Society President Troy Taylor in 2001 of a light burning in a stairwell. Allen talks about where he had an unnerving experience in his entire life in September of 2003 while attending the Mid-South Paranormal Conference. At sunset, the Louisville team members were taking conference attendees on tours of the building, and Keith H. asked Troy Taylor, author Dave Goodwin, and Allen if they would go accompany him on a private tour. At 11:30 p.m., they all climbed the stairs and were standing on the fourth floor landing when Keith reached for the door handle. Just before Keith touched the handle, the heavy iron door opened and slammed shut. And he said that Keith made a face that indicated that this whole incident wasn't staged. Tore opened the door and no one was there in the hallway. They looked down the floor outside the door, and there was a single wet footprint about the size of a woman's foot. This is when Alan started getting goosebumps. Later, Keith said that his group had found several such footprints before. As a rule, they are colder and last longer than the average footprint. The Waverly Hills Tuberculosis Sanitarium's reputation as one of America's most haunted sites was cemented when 2 investigations of the old hospital by the Atlantic Paranormal Society were featured on the Sci-Fi Channel show Ghost Hunters in 2006 and 2007. The activity witnessed by the group include phenomena that has been observed by Troy Taylor and others, such as sudden appearances of ghostly silhouettes. The castle-like structure's increasing popularity has ensured that sightings will continue to be reported for years and years to come. Actually, I mean, I've seen the Sci-Fi Channel actual, show of Waverly Hills. I tell you what, it is creepy as all get out. I mean, it gave me the willies watching it. I mean, it really did. I'm like thinking, holy God, this is just woo. Like I mentioned before, some of my coworkers tried to get me to, go with them there, and I'm like, I don't think so. No, thank you. I think I will pass. But anyway, if you ever get a wild hair and you want to, have the puckies scared out of you really good, and you don't feel like going bar hopping and wilder, try, the Waverly Hills Sanitarium in Louisville. So, hang on guys, I have more ghostly tales to tell you, alright? So hang on.